This is Exopolitics Radio. I'm Alfred Lambermont Weber, and we're with a very special guest, Stanley A. Fulham, who is a former NORAD officer and the author of an extraordinary book, which I recommend to all of you as a remarkable revelation of exopolitics, politics, government, and law in the universe, and how matters really function around our planet Earth. Welcome, Stan.
Yes, thank you, Alfred.
For those of our listeners who may not be familiar, I wondered if you could just briefly introduce yourself and say how it was that you were first introduced to interaction with other intelligent civilizations.
Yes, well, first of all, I served during World War II in Bomber Command, and I was shot down in 1943, and I ended up in a prison camp. One of the prison camps I was in was Stalag 357 near Torun in Poland. And on a hot summer day in July 1944, somebody ran in and said, "There's a rocket in the sky above." And we all ran out. We looked, and there it was, this huge red rocket. It had no wings, and it made no sound, but it was traveling at considerable speed. And so, of course, we assumed it to be a German rocket, because the Germans had the V-1 and the V-2 rockets, which they were hurling at England at that time. Until somebody confounded the issue when he said, yes, but it's flying from east to west, and we are in Poland. So obviously it's coming from Russia, and Russia had no such technology. We all trained in aircraft recognition, so we knew what all the military aircraft in the world looked like. This was no conventional military aircraft. But never for one moment did we ever think that this would be an alien spacecraft, because during the war, that was not a conventional concept. Nobody thought of aliens. And so we forgot about it. And also in our camp, I had several fighter pilots who were shot down and were telling me about their experience with Foo Fighters. You're aware of Foo Fighters, Alfred, I'm sure?
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm sure many of your listeners are as well. Well, Ron, my good friend, was telling me about his experience with these Foo Fighters when he was flying on a sortie over France, and two of these Foo Fighters attached themselves to each wingtip and flew alongside of him for about 10 minutes. He was rather frightened about the incident, because he really had never seen anything like this before. But they didn't take any action against the Spitfires, so he relaxed, and in about 10 minutes' time, they flew away. He returned to base and reported the incident to the debriefing officer, but he was met with absolute cynicism and a bit of ridicule. And so he was telling me, he says, I had the same experience on two other occasions, but I never again reported these incidents. And I thought, yeah, that's pretty well typical. People just don't want to be ridiculed and laughed at on these matters. So, but still, they were not alien spacecraft. No one ever thought of that during the war. It was only when, dear, you remember the Don's experience when he spotted the flying saucer over Oregon in 1947?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
And only at that time when he reported that, and there was a book written about it, then, and of course the Roswell incident, then of course the military and the world then realized, then what we were witnessing were alien spacecraft of some type or another. So I left the Air Force, and I did a number of things with the university and all this sort of thing, but I returned to the permanent force several years later. When I returned, I worked as a fighter controller in NORAD. A fighter controller is one that controls the fighter jets onto the enemy bombers, so to speak, because it's all done at night, and of course they don't know where they are. They can't see them. So you're going to bring the fighters to within about 30 to 40 miles of the enemy bombers, and then their own radar takes over, and they come in for the attack. Fighter controllers do that, and besides that, we we monitor all of our skies. It's a continental defense. NORAD is just that. I want to explain, too, that NORAD is not a military organization. NORAD is a defense system. I was an officer in the Canadian Air Force. And my good friend, the intelligence officer I dealt with in NORAD, was a USAF officer. But anyway, that was part of our work, identifying all the aircraft flying all over North America. One particular incident when I reported for duty one midnight shift is that there were two UFOs that were hovering over about 2 miles away from the base, and they just at about 1,000 feet. They just sat there for quite a while with their lights around the perimeter of the spacecraft. Nothing else was happening, and so I checked with NORAD on the matter and reported the incident. And then I scrambled two standby jets after them. When they took off, then the UFOs flew away and hovered over the Pacific Ocean several miles west of Vancouver. And minutes later, when our jets approached them, then they sped away over the Pacific Ocean, and we never saw them again. But the next morning, the base commander called, and he says, the media are calling. And as you know, there was nothing unusual that happened last night. There was no reason for us to be speaking to the media. And that was fine. We understood that we weren't going to contravene the base commander's the orders on this matter. But about 2-3 weeks later, NORAD called for a meeting with the squadron commander, myself, and the technical officer. And what they wanted to do is they were not critical of what I had done, but they wanted to refine the reporting process. And so we discussed this at length all day. And that night I sat down at the bar with one of these intelligence officer, I call him Major Dave. And I told him about the incident with the base commander telling us, well, you don't talk to the media. He says, yes, there's an international agreement that was signed, I think it was 1956. He saw the papers. And he says, there were no signatures to them, so I don't know who signed them. But he says it was an agreement between Canada and the United States whereby it would regulate and control the dissemination of information on UFOs. And he says that's all part of the process. And that remained pretty well the system all the way through. And then I'd like to mention one more thing, Alfred. It was also a mindset, a military mindset. Years later, Dave, my good friend, the NORAD intelligence officer, was telling me, he says they were at the NORAD officers' mess dinner. And the general there was telling them about his experience when he appeared before a congressional subcommittee hearing on continental defense. And he said that included, of course, NORAD. And he said they humiliated me. They ridiculed me. He says they insulted me. He says they implied as that NORAD officers were suffering from illusions and delusions. So one of the officers standing by said to him, but General, if the public were made more aware of the situation, then the politicians then would be more likely to come out and speak on this issue. And the general said, the public is uneducated, it's uninformed, misinformed, and they're just too effing stupid to cope with the reality of an alien existence. And then he turned to my friend Dave and he said, Dave, I tell you, if you want a career in this Air Force, you keep your mouth shut about UFOs. And Dave, he accepted that mindset. That was it. And it was mine as well. You don't talk to the public about it because all you get is ridicule. And then throughout my career, I never discussed it. Dave did the same. But I'm just giving you this bit of background to understand why I waited so long to do any writing about it.
Sure. Now, just to begin to ease into the in-depth story here, you've actually been in what I just want to use the term dimensional communication, because you use a dimensional go-between to communicate with a group of representatives of a group of interdimensional beings who in turn have related to you the activities of what I would call a regional galactic governance body called the Council of Eight. Is that sort of a fair a fair characterization?
Yes.
Now, how was it that you came about to be in this set of circumstances, just from the human point of view?
Well, Alfred, I left the Air Force. I retired from the Air Force, and so did my friend Dave. He was in the intelligence work there. And when we retired, we were left with the same questions we had when we joined the Air Force. Who were they? Where were they from? Are they a threat? What about the abductions? All of these questions we had, and we had no answer, but it bothered me, and I really wanted to know. So I never talked to the agents, so I had no contact with them. I read every book on UFOs that you could ever, I think was ever published. There were no answers. There was this sighting and there was that sighting, but there's nobody could come out right and tell us, well, this is where they're from, this is what they're doing here, and this type of thing. So it was a very frustrating time for me. So I was talking to a very spiritual friend of mine, and I said to her, you know, one of the things that really confused me, and not only me, all the officers in NORAD and the fighter pilots as well, who had experience with UFOs, is that, like on my radar, sometimes you were tracking a UFO, it would appear, disappear, disappear, suddenly. And also I talked to a fighter pilot who was chasing a UFO over the mountains in British Columbia there, and he said the UFO disappeared into the side of a mountain at terrific speed, probably well over 2,000 miles an hour. There was no crash, no explosion. And then he says, a moment later, it appeared to the top of the mountain, hovered for a moment, and then flew away, completely unscathed. I talked to a commercial airlines pilot who was flying from Europe to the United States, and he told me of a similar incident where he saw this UFO dive into the sea, no crash, nothing else, and a few miles further, it reappeared, hovered around his aircraft for a while, then flew away. And that is what I found very intriguing, because that obviously was in total violation of all our third-dimensional physical laws. So obviously they were not from our dimension. So I explained this to my spiritual friend, and I said, so, you know, there's no way of me getting this information because I can't contact them, I can't talk to them. You know, how will we ever find out about this, you know, this reality? And she says, well, you can. She says, you can go to the spiritual world. The spiritual world knows all of these things because they have their Akashic records. They can see. And the other thing is, at the subconscious level, the soul is non-separate from all other souls in the universe. Now, that's a concept which is very difficult for anybody to understand or to accept. In fact, it's beyond our comprehension. I'm not going to belabor that, but I'm telling you what information I got. And so she suggested to me that I can talk to a group known as the Transgender Group, which is a group of 43,000 very old souls who have lived on different planets, lived in the spiritual systems here, realms here and there, have a vast wealth of experience and knowledge, and they've grouped together to provide advice and assistance for those of us who are on that rugged trail back to the Creator. It's not an easy ride. It's a pretty rough life, as many of your listeners, I'm sure, would agree. So, and she said, you can contact them through a channeler. I should recommend it. I do so through Rick Thurston, who is a very reputable person here in Canada. Well, I was born and raised in the Catholic Church, and I attended the Catholic University and this sort of thing, so that sort of went against my background quite a bit, but I was so desperate for information that I finally contacted Rick, and I talked to the transgenders for the first time for about half an hour, and I tell you, I was in a complete state of shock, because I realized there was nothing about me, about my past, that they didn't know, and even some of the things about my future. And so I sort of sat back for a while, but a few months later I went back, and then I carried on a dialogue with them for about the past 11, 12 years, talking to them almost regularly every month, one thing or another. And I found out it doesn't matter. Whatever question I have for them, I can ask them about the string theory. I can ask them about some of the most sophisticated medical research being done. I can ask them about politics. It doesn't matter. All of that is visible to them because all of the minds, your mind, my mind, all our listeners, at the subconscious level is non-separate. So they know what is known and thought throughout the universe. And that is where I got my information from. My book is not my book. My book is the information I got from the transcenders.
Right. Now, jumping over to your book then, at some point, through this communication channel, through the transcenders that are the interdimensional beings,
yes,
they start introducing you to a Regional Galactic Governance Council known as the Council of Eight, which includes a number of star systems. And you've got them listed here in the book. And, in fact, there's a tremendous amount of information for those of us who follow this, and for people who are just being introduced into this area. I mean, they talk about the Council of Eight consisting of the Pleiades, Orion. I'm looking at page 27 of your book, Sirius, the Bootes. That was a real revelation, understanding the relationship between the Bootes and the Greys. Alpha Centauri, Consulae, Zeta Reticuli, and Pusati. How did that feel to you when you first found out about the Council of Eight?
Well, this came gradually. I started talking. The information I wanted, first of all, was more about the universe and about the agents. And so I started questioning about that 11, 12 years ago. So I've been talking to them regularly about the agents ever since. And so there was no specific moment when I was like in a state of surprise. Nothing surprised me about what they said. Because besides, the transcenders as a group of 43,000 very ancient souls cannot lie. That's impossible. They cannot lie. So you ask them for advice, they'll give you advice. Mind you, they don't tell you what to do. They won't give you cures for cancer or anything like that because they don't want to violate the two basic principles of God's creation, which is free will and choice. But so the information came over a period of time. The information in that book is really the information I got, I'd say, over the last 10, 11 years.
Right. Now, before we go any further, Stan, my curiosity was really piqued because we're talking about upper dimensional advanced races here, and I've got 4 books in my library here by my dear friend Ms. Pereira, who claims that she is a telepath, and she's filled these 4 books with the Arcturians, who are here, and they claim that they're here with some of their spacecraft are as large as a planet, and they work on the light grids of the planet. And I'm just wondering, have you heard anything how the Arcturians fit in with the Council of Eight?
No, I didn't, Alfred. But I did ask the transcenders. I says, are there other groups of souls like the transcenders who communicate with us here on Earth? And they said yes. The White Brotherhood is one. They are, and the Arcturians, and there's apparently there's many others. So there's probably a great deal of truth in what she writes.
Okay, good. So, i.e., I guess what I'm trying to say is that those of us who are in this field have also been researching and have read about other star systems like Arcturus that claim that they're sending resources here to help out humanity. And it's not that this doesn't negate that. This just focuses on certain aspects of it. Is that? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they focus on certain specific things, but the Alien Council consists of the most powerful star systems in the universe.
I see.
The Alpha Centaurians, for example, is the greatest military complex in the universe. They can literally blow a planet to dust, and they've done it. So, and they monitor us 24 hours a day. They've been doing it for hundreds of thousands of years. And the Pleiadians, of course, are a very powerful planetary system as well. And they function, the group that you mentioned, they function under the Alien Council. But that doesn't mean to say that there aren't others who are also communicating with certain individuals on Earth and providing advice and helping out one thing or another. But I want to assure you one thing, Alfred, is that because it's quite a common belief is that, there's some very evil aliens out there and they're going to take over. In fact, they're living in caves on Earth now, and then where there's all kinds of sacred, bloodletting and sexual orgies and all this kind of stuff taking place. And the transgenders say no, there's none of that, because the Alien Council, especially the Alpha Centaurians, would never allow it. So that doesn't mean to say, but at the same time, is that there are other groups who do communicate with individuals on Earth. And I can think of another one in particular, and I have a great admiration for him and all the information he provided, is Billy Meyer in Switzerland. For example, he was in touch with a Pleiadian called Semjazi, and everything there, the transgenders would confirm was pretty accurate. Now, in some of the predictions that Semjazi made, see, this is where some things go wrong sometimes.
Yeah.
Because, you see, the aliens have souls like we. Now, when God created all the souls, according to the transgenders, he gave each soul only two things: free will and choice. Then he created the universes, and he says, go and experience all things. So he's not going to sit in judgment of us if we did anything wrong, because from God's perspective, there's no wrong. It's just all experience. So the thing is that this is what it's all about, and there are other groups of people, entities or agents, what it is, who do try to provide information, advice to us on almost like on a person-to-person basis. Mm-hmm. Well, the transgender are doing the same. They're not talking to the world. They talk to me, and there's several others. But incidentally, Alfred, I've been asked about this quite often. Are you the only one on Earth with whom they contact? And I said, no. There are several others. But the thing is, the one in Russia or the one in China or wherever, maybe in Europe, they ask, and they're more concerned about questions relating to Europe or to Russia and this sort of thing. But I was more interested in the extraterrestrial. So that's the reason why I came up with my book.
Right. Now, just before we get to the really important issues at hand of the Earth's environment, I just want to go to one more cosmological issue that I found very, very pressing and interesting. According to the information presented by the Transcenders, the Council of Eight first came together about 1 million years ago when there was an attempted takeover of our planet by, quote, the reptilian faction, I guess, within the galaxy or this universe, which is about 300 billion strong, it says, and that the reptilians' motivation is to make farms of human planets. And that then 2,000 years ago, with around the incarnation of Jesus of Nazareth, that was the last time that there was sort of some kind of armed conflict where the Council of Eight resumed, there was again an attempted reptilian incursion. I wondered if you could go in depth on that issue, because I know that people are really concerned about the reptilian issue at some level and are very confused about it.
Yeah. Well, what it indicates, what you just said, is that the world, the universe rather, is mysterious beyond our wildest imaginations. We just have no concept. And I talked to transcenders about it, and I asked them about today, and they told me, in fact, one of my books I'm publishing next year is called Strange Aliens. It is a very, very strange universe, because when God created the universes, and he gave us free will and choice, and things would develop in the billions and billions of different ways. There's not another Alfred Weber or Stan Fulham in the universe, and there are zillions upon zillions of souls. And so there are, and there's nobody, God doesn't have to sit in moral judgment of any of his creation. We do, mind you, but God doesn't. So we have all of these different creatures developing according to a large extent, according to the planetary energies that exist on which they exist. So they develop in a different way. Now, the reptilian empire, known as Reptilian Empire, developed the way they did. Now, their main food is other beings, but mind you, Alfred, so it's not entirely strange when you find is that some of the more advanced civilized societies, planetary societies, when they come to Earth and they study us, for the unseen, mind you, they're in the fourth dimension, they study us for a while, and they think we're not much better than animals. They see us killing animals, eating animals. They see killing ourselves. They see all these diseases, and they think we're not much better than animals. You see, the thing is that it's all comparative, and so there's some pretty bad characters out there. There's another one called the Force of Evil, and they try to invade our galaxy. Oh, that's a long time ago. And again, in fact, that's the time when the Council was formed in order to protect our galaxy against this vast, powerful force of evil. I'm getting more information about that, and I'll include it in my book, Dealing with Strange Aliens. But, yes, there are a lot of strange things out there, Alfred, a lot of strange things, beyond our belief, beyond our understanding. And if we weren't protected, we would have disappeared a long time ago.
Well, does that mean that the Council of Eight, I'm just trying to read, have placed us in a kind of a quarantine or kind of cordoned us off so that we're protected because we're not able to fend for ourselves? Is that?
Yes. Now, that raised a question, Alfred. I'm glad you brought that up because I've been asked about this on a number of occasions. I had written in my book, as you know, because you read the book, that the transcenders told me there are countless thousands of planetary societies just like ours who have polluted their environment to complete extinction. Not a single being, not an animal, not a plant survived. And the Pleiadians and others, in the Alien Council, find it rather sad when they, in their space travel, and they see sometimes this planet out there. All it is just a black planet, nothing on it, no life, no trees, no beings, just circling around their sun, and at one time was a flourishing planetary society. And this has happened in countless thousands of years, which raised my question. And getting back, to the sightings we had over New York,
right,
and what they're planning to do in the future in this
right.
It's all because they decided about a year ago that our environmental crisis is getting to be so bad they will have to intervene. They have no choice, otherwise we will not exist. And they're planning to do so by 2015, but they don't want to do so just suddenly because their intervention will create massive fear and panic and hysteria. So there's a purpose in what they are trying to achieve, and that's how they're going to do it. Now, getting back to this is that so they decided they were going to do so about a year ago, and that is a major, major decision.
Yeah,
in fact, the transcenders
Stan, Stan, could I just jump in here?
Yeah.
and I'm sorry to break your train of thought, but I just want to bring this up so our listeners understand. I'm reading here from page 207 of your book. It says, the Alien Council has considered the Earth's environmental crisis and determined not to interfere at this time. In other words, there's the law of non-interference, so that here it appears as though the Council has set aside, the situation is so serious, and we are so fortunate that the Council has set aside the law of non-interference. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yes.
Well, that's astounding.
Yes, it is.
Well, why is it that we are so fortunate that they've set aside the law of non-interference?
Very good question. I've been asked that many times, and I asked the transgenders that. I says, here they were. They know, they monitor everything in our galaxy and out in the universe. They could see some of the planetary societies polluting their environment to total extinction. They did nothing. They didn't intervene. And yet in this case, on Earth, they decided they were going to save us. Isn't that a major, major change in their thinking and their attitude towards other alien societies? And the transgender said yes. So I wanted to know the reasons why. And they said, for one thing, the Earth is unique in the universe. The emotional energies you have on Earth is unique. There is no other planet in the universe that has as much emotional energies as you have. That is the reason why, for example, the aliens are fascinated with the Earth. For example, during the last Winter Olympic Games in Vancouver, there were over 300 billion aliens who were watching the Winter Games. Why is it? Well, they watched our sports like hockey and football, all this sort of thing, and they watched these people down there, the humans, yelling and screaming and crying and hooting and hollering and this sort of thing. They don't understand it because they don't have that kind of emotional energies, but they are fascinated by it. And that is the reason why they also monitor a lot of our communications and movies. And the Alpha Centaurians, for example, who are a very tough bunch of beings, they love our old Western movies. They know all about Tom Mix and Roy Rogers and all that sort of thing. They just love that kind of thing. So we are important in that aspect, is that we are unique. How come? Why are we unique? I'm not quite clear, but I'm going to get that clear with transgenders. I'm not quite clear on that. Although somebody said, well, yes, because we're God's special creation. Well, I don't know about that, but maybe. Anyway, and the other thing is that there was hope for us because they monitor us. They know us far better than we do. And so, especially the Pleiadians, who monitor us very, very closely and helped us over the past million of years, and they saw that there was hope for our spiritual development. Now, mind you, there are no religions amongst them. But let's not get confused with this now, because like someone mystic once said, is that there are no atheists in the universe. They only exist on Earth. How a true statement, because they are very spiritual, but in a different way, because their understanding of the universe and of God and God's creation is so vastly beyond ours, is that they don't need the religious rituals and all this sort of thing for their relationship to God. So that is very important. And they saw hope in us. They saw that big spiritual change which is taking place. In fact, it's taking place now, according to the Mayan prophecies. And within the next 10 years, you will hardly recognize our world. You certainly will have a hard time recognizing our religions. So there's those two basic reasons, Alfred.
Yeah. May I just ask, and is there any factor that Jesus of Nazareth incarnated here?
Is there any what?
As part of the mix.
Yeah.
Is part of the mix that we had 2,000 years ago an incarnation like Jesus of Nazareth, in other words, a creator's son, or not?
Christ was no accident.
Yeah, i.e., that could it be that one of the reasons why the law of non-interference has been set aside was that we had an incarnation 2,000 years ago of a creator's son on this planet?
Yeah. I was thinking more of free will and church and, in terms of doing things evil and this sort of thing. But Christ is, when he stood before Pilate, I asked the transgenders about that. Well, first of all, I said, did Christ really live on earth? And they said, yes. I said, did he walk on water? Yes. Did he cure the sick and dying? Yes. And the transgender said, and he took 2 loaves of bread and 5 fish, and he fed a multitude of 5,000 people. And then I said, and he was crucified? Yes. And he walked out of the tomb? Yes. So, this is a very unusual being, a being who can transcend the physical reality in which he lived. And, of course, that is true. But the thing is, of course, his message is not really in the Bible. I'm sorry to say this, Alfred, because what Christ wrote has in large extent been destroyed, but there's still some of it around, and it'll make its appearance within the next, I would say, about the next 4 or 5 years. But anyway, the thing is that Christ, when he stood before Pilate, and I asked the transgenders about that. So he stood before Pilate, and Pilate said, "Are you the king? Are you the Son of God?" And Christ said, "Yes." Unfortunately, he didn't say anymore. He should have explained it a little bit better, because Alfred, if you were there, the transgenders would say to you, or to, as they said to me, if you were standing before Pilate, and Pilate said to you, "Well, Alfred Weber, are you the Son of God?" And you would have to say yes, because we are all created by God. We all come from God. Our soul does, not our physical bodies. Let's not get confused with that. And so, but there are some souls, like the transgenders, for example, are vastly beyond, in experience and knowledge and spiritualism, vastly, and their concept of spiritualism vastly beyond ours. But there are souls like Christ who are, great spirits. There's no way of describing it. And his function in his existence, he goes around to different planetary systems, and he teaches what he taught. Basically, you are your brother's keeper. And so that is, and he's not coming back in body, of course, but his Christ consciousness is returning to Earth within the next 10 to 20 years. And it'll start off in Russia, as I think I wrote in my book, and it'll expand from there throughout the world.
Which is very interesting, because many that information has come dimensionally through other channels, such as Edgar Casey, that says that Russia will be the first source of Christ consciousness.
Yes, that's right.
Also, now, Stan, so we now have properly set the stage, I believe, and we're up to a very dramatic moment, and that moment is October 13th, 2010, at which you, I believe, were a very courageous individual to have published your book, to have published in your book, and to have taken a stand with that public date. And I wondered if you could share with us the process that you went through in publishing those dates, where there have been other individuals who have published those dates in the past, and things haven't occurred, and there's been a lot of disappointment and things like that.
Yes, Alfred. Predictions are very difficult to make because of the one basic element involved, which is the fundamentals of free will and choice. Now, all the aliens have all the souls throughout the universe have free will and choice. This is not unique to us. So the Palladians, who were sort of masterminding this UFO display, they considered all the factors involved, because they know us better. They know us far better than we know ourselves and the conditions on Earth. And once the Asian Council decided that they were going to intervene to save us from our environmental crisis, they decided, well, they simply cannot come down en masse and create massive panic and fear and hysteria. They would do so gradually. And so about a year ago, just before my book went to print, about, I think we were on January, February, but just before that, the transgenders told me, I was discussing this situation with them, and they said the Asian Council had decided then that they would intervene. I said, whoa, what a great decision, one of the greatest decisions in the drama of the universe. And that was fine. And then they were going to do so with this UFO display over our principal cities. That was the intent. Now, about 3 weeks ago, that didn't happen, by the way. They appeared over New York. About 3 weeks ago, when I was talking to transgender, they said that especially the Pleiadians, because these were Pleiadian spacecraft, and the Pleiadians determined, no, that we weren't quite ready for that, and then we'd create too much fear and panic and hysteria if they did that over all our principal cities, and they would just focus in on one major city for now. And the process has started. It won't stop, but they would start, and they picked New York because it's an international city, cosmopolitan, and the people there are quite blasé, and so it'd be easier for them to accept UFOs up in their sky. And so this is what they decided to do, and this is what they did. It wasn't balloons or any of that damn nonsense. But anyway, the thing is, they did that. Now, so some people have then challenged me and says, well, where's all, they were supposed to be over all these principal cities, and that didn't occur. And I explained to them just what I've said. But I said the process has started. Now, they will appear over other cities in the near future. I will give that date sometimes, maybe in December. And I'm sticking my neck out again. And I know when I wrote that about October 13th, I know several of my friends and thought, oh, you're being foolish. That's a ridiculous thing to do, because predictions seldom turn out, and if it doesn't work out on October 13th, then your credibility is destroyed and your book is destroyed. And I said, yeah, I'm aware of that, but I had so much faith in the transgenders and what they were telling me that I decided I would risk that. And so I'd say maybe in December, I will publish through our website the potential dates for the next sightings, and then the transgenders tell me that will then accelerate, and then there'll be more sightings over the continents, and then it'll become almost appearances on a daily basis. So that's what that situation is there. Now, mind you, also, Alfred, I want to explain this. There are quite a number of people who said, yeah, but there are many other sightings as well over San Francisco, San Diego, many other places. I said, yes. And also over China, there was some rather some very strange things happening over China, such as some people correlate the sighting of a UFO with the disappearance of a village in the Qinling province of China. Have you read about that, Alfred?
Yes. Yes, I have.
That's a very, very strange situation. I have the information about that, and I can't divulge that right now. Did it happen? Yes. And I'll write about that, and I'll post it on my website in the near future.
Excellent. Now, what is all this leading up to?
It's leading up to it'll be not only the Pleiadians, but I think to a large extent the Pleiadians in the year 2015. Well, one of the things they will plan to do, of course, appear before the United Nations in 2014, in about 4 years' time.
Now, is that over the UN or in the UN?
They will appear at the UN.
You mean they will actually...
They will address the United Nations.
The Pleiadians will address...
Yes.
The United Nations.
And one of the reasons why, of course, they picked the Pleiadians as their spokesperson, so to speak, because the Pleiadians look more like us. They're about 8 to 10 feet tall. They're blonde, blue-eyed people, very fine features, and of course, a great many Pleiadians, as well as, practically all of the Alpha Centaurians and many others speak English. They have no difficulty in learning language. They also speak Russian and Chinese and French and German and so forth. They have no trouble, but they monitor all our communications, which most of it is in English. So they're very fluent.
Now, Stan, as a former NORAD officer, how are they going to get their ships to even land at the UN without NORAD scrambling jets?
Oh, Alfred, NORAD has known about UFOs for going all the way back from the day it was formed. You know, my experience, I told you about scrambling these two jets after UFOs on the West Coast here about 50 years ago. There was nothing unique about that. There were hundreds of cases like that. That happens all the time, except NORAD doesn't publish the information. They don't publish that at all, so people are not aware that these incidents are happening all the time. And the one thing they do know, that these aliens, spacecraft, have never taken offensive action against our fighter jets. Now, I know that you know the story of Captain Mantell. You? Alfred?
Yes, it was at God-Man Air Force Base, and it was Mantell. You see, I wrote about that back in the 70s and put forth a theory called the context communication of extraterrestrial communication, which is that encounters like that are almost like symbolic communications. In other words, they chose an airbase named God-Man in order to start making human beings think about God.
Well, in the case of Captain Mantell, when he chased that UFO, I inquired about that because there have been other similar, not many, but occasionally other similar incidents. When he got too close to the UFO didn't take offensive action against him at all, didn't fire any weapons or anything like that. But the UFOs emit a very powerful electromagnetic force, energies. And when our fighter aircraft gets within that sphere, it interacts with the physical dimension of the aircraft and literally will explode the aircraft. And that's exactly what happened to Captain Mantell.
Well, what this implies for a Pleiadian representative of the Council of Eight to address the General Assembly in New York or the Palace of Nations in Geneva, if they choose that site, but most probably the General Assembly in New York, there's going to have to be a worldwide transformation of governments between now and 2014. Because right now, as you know, the orders are shoot to kill.
No.
They aren't?
In Russia, they are. Not in the United States. Russia just shot down a UFO and killed all its crew here about 4 years ago. Because, you see, it goes way back to the days of Stalin and Roosevelt. When the Birdies, they are abductors, when they contacted the American and the Russian governments, because they posed the greatest threat with their missiles, their rockets, their fighter jets, and so forth. And so they said, look, would you turn a blind eye to our abductions if we give you some alien technology? And Roosevelt and Truman and their military top aides discussed it and decided yes, because we don't, then they'll give it to the Russians. But Stalin took a different approach altogether. He said, no. He said, we'll have nothing to do with them. And if they ever take any action against a Russian citizen, we'll shoot them down. And they've done this. This is not the first time. Not often, but they've done that. Because most of the time they just ignore them. But with the United States, I don't know of a single. And Dave, my good friend, a lifelong friend in the NORAD intelligence, who knew the situation, and according to the information he had, he doesn't know of a single incident where a USAF or Canadian fighter jet ever shot at a UFO.
Okay, Stan, let me provide you with some historical data that I'm personally familiar with. Yep. Number one. And that's because one of my research associates, Will Allen, is a very fine gentleman who was on Air Force One, an officer on Air Force One for under 3 administrations of Bush Sr., Clinton, and Bush Jr. And he has a Booties implant in him, and he goes out and he now photographs the Booty's UFO coming in over the Capitol. In July 1952, you have the Booty's UFOs manifesting in July 1952 right over the U.S. Capitol. The photographs are in newspapers throughout the world. There, Truman dispatched F-86s. Two of those were shot down because the F-86s were ordered to go after them to shoot them down.
What year was that, Alfred?
That was 1952.
Okay, yeah, but possibly at that stage, because they were very paranoid in the American military and the government. Well, I'll say the government at the presidential level, and so because they didn't really know too much about them, they knew about the abductions, but nothing else. So yeah, that's possible. Yeah, I won't deny that.
No. And also, I have photographs of a Booty's hyperdimensional UFO being chased by a U.S. fighter jet scrambled out of Maryland in July 2002.
Oh, yeah. Is that I did the same. I sent two Canadian Air Force jets after these UFOs. Not with orders to shoot or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was just to report back what they could see.
But then, okay. So, what are the set of circumstances under which the Pleiadian representatives and ambassadors would speak at the UN in 2014? We're now in 2010.
Yep.
The changes between now and then would be so wonderful and so magnificent. What do you envision those changes to be?
Well, see, that's just that I don't see, according to transgenders, they don't see anything wonderful and changes taking place in the next 2 years. It's very much like the Mayan prophecy predicted.
Oh.
Yes, because, you see, there's Earth change. Environmental crisis is one thing. That's the pollution of our atmosphere.
Yeah.
Now, Earth changes is earthquakes, tsunamis, tornadoes, all that sort of thing. It's starting. It'll probably even start this winter with massive Earth changes in Asia. And you remember what Edgar Casey said about Japan? Eventually would disappear.
Yeah.
And look, and also Eastern China, the east coast of China will be devastated, and so many other lands out there will be seriously affected. And so it starts then. It'll start maybe this winter, and it gradually gets worse, but 2012 is the worst year of all. So there are not good years at all, Alfred. I'm sorry, but according to the transgenders, those are grim, grim years ahead of us.
So that what you're saying is that by 2014, all of this duress may have transformed humanity to the extent where there would not be resistance to the Pleiadians appearing at the United Nations. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. No, by that time, the world will have been accustomed to seeing them. There will be some interaction and communication with them and this sort of thing. So, no, we'll be ready for them in 2014. Because by 2015, the transgenders told me is that they must appear in our atmosphere. If they're going to clean up our atmosphere, they're going to be in our third dimension. So you may have 200-300 spacecraft up there in our atmosphere, cleaning up our atmosphere, and they will be seen, but at least we'll know what they're doing. But it may take them as long as 12 to 15 months in order to clean up our atmosphere.
Now, Stan, we have only a couple of minutes left in this segment. Would you be willing to stay over some extra time?
When?
Now.
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. Let me just take a quick break. We'll take just a quick break, and we'll be back momentarily with Stan Fulham, a former NORAD officer and author of Challenges of Change. This is Exopolitics Radio. I'm your host, Alfred Weber. Please stay tuned. Thank you. welcome back. This is Alfred Lambermont Weber, and we're rejoining a very challenging discussion with author Stanley A. Fulham, a former NORAD officer and author of Challenges of Change. Welcome back, Stan.
Yes, Alfred.
Well, we have just gotten to the present moment, and we're looking at the scenario between 2010, October 13th, was sort of when humanity got to see, I guess, what they call the handwriting on the wall in terms of predicted UFO sightings over New York City, predicted by yourself, and that's important because you predicted them along with a 350-page book that is filled with wisdom and information from an interdimensional group that brings information from a regional galactic governance authority to this planet. So this is quite a planetary update that we're getting. But where the point where we were in our last segment is that it appears that we're now in 2010. And what the Council of Eight has said, and the Transcenders have said, is that in the year 2014, the representatives for the Council of Eight, which is a regional galactic governance authority representing 8 major star systems within the galaxy, would be addressed physically by the Pleiadians to announce their program of cleaning up our atmosphere and environmental pollution so our planet does not go into environmental collapse. Is that sort of a fair summary? Or
yes.
Now, there are so many questions that come from this, Stan. I mean, there's a thing of clearing up the symptoms, but if we merely go in and clear up the garbage, if the Pleiadians just go in and clear up the garbage, and they don't tell humanity how to transform their permanent war economy and their exploitative, non-sustainable lifestyle and economy, isn't the atmosphere just going to become polluted again?
Well, exactly. That is the reason why there's going to be, and there will be, a massive change in our economic concepts and our governmental setups, one thing and another, within the next several years. Within the next 4 or 5 years, there'll be massive changes. There's got to be, because we simply cannot go on the way we are, every man for himself. The world functions on greed. Suddenly greed becomes the operative word. That is indicative of our society. Alien societies don't function that way. I for example, Alfred, I look at all the suffering in the world today. For example, malaria. India just reported the other day that they underreported their malaria situation by vastly underreported, perhaps by several millions. There are millions of people suffering greatly from malaria, and mainly children. And there's dengue, and there's other mosquito vector diseases. Then, of course, there are others. There's AIDS, and there's cancer, and so forth. And the grim irony of it all is that here these children are suffering terribly. Why? Because there's no morphine given to them to ease their pain. Why not? Because they don't have the money to buy this stuff. I think that's a terrible, terrible statement of our so-called civilization. Now, do we have the money? Of course we do. Look at the nuclear bombs that we built. Look at the nuclear ships that we built. Look at the massive military forces we have. And we're spending hundreds of millions of billions of dollars maintaining all that system. What the hell for? To kill people. And yet we have millions of people suffering terribly, and we ignore them. Where is our sense of social moral responsibility? Where are all these Christian values? Where are all the Christian churches, and what are they preaching? What are they going to preach tomorrow? Are they going to talk about that? Why the hell don't we get rid of all these nuclear arms? It won't do us a bit of good, because I wrote in my book, the translator told me a long time ago, there's no way that the aliens, the Alien Council, will ever allow a nuclear war on Earth. They may allow one drop, like India and Pakistan. It was they came very close to it some time ago, where India might have dropped atomic bomb on Pakistan, and vice versa. But then the aliens would have stepped in and stopped it then, because if we want to destroy ourselves, that is up to us. But if we decide to do anything of that nature that will interfere with them, then that's a different situation. Now, when we explode atomic bombs on Earth, it affects the ley lines. You're aware of the ley lines, aren't you?
Yes.
The ley lines permeate the universe. And when we do that and we distort these ley lines, we then create hazards for their space travel. That is the reason why they can't allow that to happen. And they will not allow a nuclear war to happen. And what are we doing? We're spending trillions and trillions of dollars building these damn nuclear bombs. And on top of that, we have the hydrogen bombs, which is a mental sickness all of its own. So I feel very strongly about that. And I'm rather bitter about it, because I find that the ones who should be speaking about it, the Vatican and other religions, all our good spiritual people, this is what in our governments, this is what they should be addressing. That they don't.
Right, and in fact, we won't get into that, because that'll really get us off sort of on a political tangent. But sticking with what the Council of Eight have announced that their plans are, and what the Transcenders appear to be communicating to you, what the plans are, what would you see as the specific future courses of action between 2010 to 2015, and how do you see this whole scenario unfold? It seems pretty awesome to me.
Yes, we're facing some very grim situations here. One of them is in the Middle East, and there again we're dealing with nuclear weapons. Iran has no bomb, and according to Transgender, never will have a bomb, nuclear bomb. The only nations who have, if we include the terrorists, the only nations who have any nuclear weapons at all is Israel. They have a massive nuclear arsenal. And Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda now has a dirty nuclear bomb and weapons of mass destruction. And so that's got to be dealt with. Now, the question arises, well, if they have it, why haven't they used it against Israel, their number one enemy? Now, according to Transcenders, and nothing is hidden from them. I've mentioned this over and over again because I want to emphasize that nothing is hidden from the Transcenders at the subconscious level. So they know what is the thinking. They know what goes on in the caves, and the Al-Qaeda caves in the Himalayas. There's about 25 to 30 jihadists led by al-Zawahiri. He's the leader of the jihadists. And they have about 1,200 or more scientists and technical staff who are working on producing this bomb and non-weapons of mass destruction. But these are rather secular people. They get paid big wages, and they enjoy that, and that's what they want to do. But they want to continue living. They don't want to give up their lives for any purpose. And so there is that moral conflict taking place now between the jihadists and the scientists and technical staff going on there. And I I suggested in my book, it is very timely now for the United States to offer a general amnesty to Al-Qaeda under certain conditions. You will hand over all your weapons of mass destruction, your bomb. You will agree to be reestablished elsewhere under United Nations administration, on and on, a number of conditions like that. So I think that is very timely, and that's going to be done fairly soon. But still the question remains, why don't they drop their bomb on Israel? It's the old problem that developed, remember me in Oklahoma City years ago? It's containment of collateral damage. They realize, that's Al-Qaeda, realizes that if they drop that bomb, or exploded that bomb in Israel, it's such a small country. There's 1 in about, I think, 250,000 Palestinians still living there. And, of course, these bombs, radioactive fallout, doesn't recognize any borders. There's Jordan, there's Lebanon, there's Syria, there's other Muslim countries nearby. What would be the effect on them? What if hundreds of thousands of them died? What would Allah say about that? So they have this moral quandary. And so they have, they're still sitting there. They haven't quite determined what they're going to do about that. So I suggested in my book, and I do hope somebody would take up this challenge and try to put pressure on the politicians to at least give it some consideration, offer them a general amnesty. That's right. One thing. That's one thing. And then, of course, we have the collapse of in the next, maybe within the next year, certainly within the next 2 years, the total financial and economic collapse of all the industrial nations of the world. What happens then? And
well, yeah. So do you see so along with the intervention in the specific intervention with their advanced technology to clean up the atmosphere that the Council of Eight have decided, will the Council of Eight be sending what we would call, civilian aid to sort of teach humans how to husband a planet and how to run an economy and how to run alternatives to war? Will we be kind of tutored in how to be a real society, or are we going to be left on our own? What is the nature of the intervention going to be? Has the transgenders talked about this at all?
Yes, I have, and in some measure I have. For example, in regards to the technology for removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, now there's several of the Asian Council members who have that technology, and that technology will be given to us. It's very sophisticated, but we will have that technology, so we'll take care of our own atmosphere thereafter. That's certainly one thing. Now, the other thing in terms of we won't be left entirely on our own, of course, mind you, within the bounds of free will and choice. But one of the things they told me is that the Pleiadians have been involved with us for many, many years. There's approximately 1,200 Pleiadians living amongst us now. And some of them are not even aware of that they are Pleiadians. They've taken on the human dimensions and that sort of thing. But they are never in positions of leadership. You will never find a Pleiadian who is a president or prime minister or anything like this. Usually they're not politicians. What they are, they're in the media, they're in business, they're in the universities, and they're all over the world. They're in the United States, Canada, Europe, Russia, China, Africa, South America. So they're here and there and all over the place. And what they do is they offer advice and they assist wherever they can, but they don't really take over and do things for us. They act more in an advisory capacity. And I suppose that will continue, maybe more so in the future, I don't know. But there's one other thing, though, Alfred, and this is very important. The changes are taking place already amongst our children. The transgenders are telling me that there are many, many children being born today and have been for the last 20, 25 years who have a different spiritual consciousness, and they are going to help to change our world, and under the leadership of the Russian guru. Now, this leader, this Russian spiritual leader, he's a young man now. He's got to be in his teens or late teens maybe, and already is having quite an influence in Russia, but he'll become even more so in the future. And he will help to change that nation, and then they will influence the rest of the world to rise to a higher spiritual consciousness, which functions on the basis as Christ taught, you are your brother's keeper. We will take care of all these sick children with malaria. We will take care of those with AIDS and all this sort of thing. And so the things will eventually are going to be better, yes, but there are going to be some terrible years within the, I say, the next 5, 6, maybe next 10 years. I don't know.
So in terms of just breakdown of you talk about, I'm just reading here, earth changes, environmental pollution, drought and famine, and financial and economic collapse. Is that what you're talking about generally?
Yes. Now, in regards to the financial collapse of all the world, as you know, the United States government, the officials at least are double talking to a very large degree when they pretend that somehow that they're going to come out of this situation they're in and everything will be fine. They're bankrupt. The United States is bankrupt, and so are many other nations in the world. And so I've noticed that a number of not only politicians but economic consultants to the government are suggesting to the president that the solution is, what they're going to do is increase their exports massively. That will create a lot of jobs in the United States, and then, of course, it's a larger tax base, and then they'll be able to handle their deficit. Well, that is fine if things went on normally, but things won't be normal in the next few months, certainly not by next spring. It's going to be in a terrible state, especially when these earth changes take place in Asia. Where will be these markets? Where Japan won't be there. China is going to be begging for help from the United States and Canada and other countries to come and help them in their recovery. And if they lose their Three Gorges Dam, then the massive damage done to China will go on for decades.
So Stan, but let me jump in here.
Yeah.
Are you saying that the transcenders are saying that there will be massive earth changes over, say, the next several years?
Over the next 2 to 3 years.
Of the type that Edgar Casey talked about?
Right on.
And there's no way of avoiding these?
No, because you see, it's not just human activity. Some of this occurs. It occurs because it's sort of a cycle type of thing. It's a cycle of energy systems in our solar system, the sun, our galaxy, and so forth. All of these things are taking place in about every 25,000 years. They readjust themselves and they create some of these changes, earth changes. So this is what we're apparently, to a large extent, we'll be facing.
Now, what role will the extraterrestrial forces in the Council of Eight and the Transcenders take during this period?
Apparently, there's not much they can do about that.
I see.
No.
Because there are all these rumors about how extraterrestrials would come in and evacuate people during Earth changes. Is there any substance to that?
You see, when Atlantis, we're going through the same thing that Atlantis went through 11,500 years ago. And, in fact, a lot of people, a lot of human beings on Earth today were on Atlantis. And why would we choose to go through this again? Baffles me. But so we did. But anyway, they had time to evacuate. And in spite of that, there are still several millions who decided no, they would not leave, and they stayed and went down with the continent. But the aliens did come in, and they removed. I don't know the numbers. Removed a lot of Atlanteans to Egypt, Europe, down to southern United States where Mexico is, one thing and another, and to South America. So, yes, they did that, and are they going to help out in this case again? They may. I don't know.
Have the transcenders given you any indication of once we're through that, how many humans may remain on the Earth?
No, they don't do that.
Now, just to switch over to another area, I know in the book you talk about how the different societies are, how things are in the Pleiades, how things are in some of the other societies, just so we can get an idea of how other civilizations run their planets and their societies. I wonder if you could share some of that information for us.
Well, Alfred, I really don't know that much about it. I know they are more democratic in their government, except the Alpha Centaurians, which is nothing but a big military base from top to bottom. And but otherwise, like the Palladians and others, everybody has sort of, well, their communication system, of course, is different, far more sophisticated than what we have. But let's say they have something like a computer. And they have these managers, not politicians. Some of them don't have politicians, don't really have a government in a sense, unless you want to call these managers a government. And supposing some issue comes up, like, shall we start trading with, say, for example, with the Kumsalais? And so everybody presses yes or no on their computer, and so then the managers get the results, and they go according to the results they get from the people that they represent. So that's the way they function, a number of them. But that is I'm giving you an instance here because I was given that instance by the transcenders, but I don't doubt is that because of free will and choice, there must be thousands and thousands of different types of systems out there.
Now, do you plan would you be a consultant to organizations or to institutions that would seek your help and your expertise during these years?
No, I'm afraid I'm too old for that, Alfred.
I see.
I just couldn't handle that. No, the information's in my book. And one of the things, though, like, for example, in regards to the things that we must do in regards to our financial collapse, Transgenders and I have discussed this at length, and they said there's only one solution. You've got to recognize you're broke, and you've got to pick up the pieces, but how, and where do you go from there? Well, one of the things they suggested, go to the international trade dollar. All trade, international trade is paid for by the so-called universal trade dollar. Now, we can still have the Canadian dollar and the American dollar and the British pound and all the rest of it, but the trade dollar would be for all international trade commerce. Now, that's one thing they've got to accept, get away from the American dollar. And that may not be a very easy thing for the American to accept, but there it is. The other thing is that practically all of these nations are broke, except for China. So what they should do now is reduce, devalue all currencies down to 10% of current values. Down to 10%, all nations. That means, of course, the implication of that is that the foreign debts are now reduced down to 10%. So, of course, some nations will say, oh, well, who's going to gain from this? Mainly the Americans. Well, maybe so. But the United States is the economic engine of the world, and unless they get going again, the rest of the world won't. And so the transgenders have suggested is that this is one thing that they can do, because if they don't, if because in their national pride they decide, oh, no, there's no way that they could reduce their dollar down to 10% of present value and accept the international trade dollar, then fine, you will live in absolute economic and financial chaos for at least another 15 years. So take your pick. So I'm trying to get that message across. And I'll tell you, I give up on the public. I'm sorry, Alfred, but my years of experience with the Air Force, and I don't rely upon the public. And so where will this activity generate from? Well, I would think in the universities, amongst the university students, if they can start talking about this and then organizing things worldwide and putting pressure on the governments, that they will accept this as the only solution now to do it now.
Right. Good. Well, so you are now engaged in writing a second book.
Well, I'm pretty well finished with the second. But the second book really deals with the Bermuda Triangle.
Okay. Well, the strange alien.
That's the third book, yeah.
The strange alien races book.
Yeah.
Good. Are there any final words that you would like to leave our listeners with in this remarkable interview?
There's so many, I wouldn't really know where to start, Alfred.
But
I think is that what we got to do, we got to put pressure on. I want to tell you this one thing that I think is very important. Is that I've talked to politicians. I've written to politicians. And Dave, my good friend, I told you about the NORAD Officer Intelligence Officer. So did he. And we found out one thing, is that they know absolutely nothing of the UFO alien phenomena. Alfred, you've forgotten more than any of the politicians in Canada or the United States know about this subject. And the thing I found out, they don't want to know. Like I was talking to one politician here a few years ago. And, basically it was like, don't talk to me about that, Stan. He says, because I'm not going to go and stick my neck out there. He says, I'm going to lose votes. I don't want to appear as a fool, because he thought he'd appear as a fool if he started questioning about the existence and reality of alien existence. So you see, this is the attitude. Don't mention that to me. I don't want to talk about it. So they know absolutely nothing about it. Now, in regards to the conspiracy of silence and the UFO cabal, people often wonder, well, how come? Is that all that's going on in the UFO cabal in Area 51? The president certainly should know about it. At least the chief of defense staff should know about it, but they don't. Why not? Because the information now is so restricted. It only goes up so far up the line, and where it stops, nobody knows. So that information is not provided to the public, so the public does not know. The politicians don't know. Who knows? Who has more information than anybody else? People like yourself and hundreds of ufologists all over the world. And so you've got to keep on doing what you're doing. Maybe more of it. Well, there's getting to be more of it as well. And I think that's important. And bring in the universities as much as you possibly can. And to have them deal with two major issues we've got to deal with now. We can't deal with, there's not much we can do about Earth changes. So I think we can set that aside, Alfred. But two things we should consider now very seriously is the Middle East and a general amnesty for Al-Qaeda. That's one thing we should be considering, and getting the hell out of the Middle East. Oh, one more point about that Middle East. If I have time, I'd just like to make a very brief comment. One of the things is say, well, there's a total imbalance in a military and political imbalance in the Middle East. It's all because Iran might build a uranium bomb, a nuclear bomb. I beg your pardon. They don't have one, and according to Transcender, they never will. Who has all of that vast nuclear arsenal? It's Israel. Well, and Israel today has nuclear submarines in the Persian Gulf, off the coast of Iran, armed with missiles that was helped and paid for by the Americans and by the French government, and the submarines are the German Dolphin submarines given to them by the Germans. And there they are, anchored off the coast of Iran with nuclear missiles pointed at Iran. Who is threatening whom? And do you hear anything about it? No, because we're given lies and lies and lies. And for years and years, while they were building up, Israel was building up this vast nuclear arsenal, they lied to the world and said no. And the United States, oh, no, they had nothing to do with it. France denied having anything to do with it. So did Germany. And yet, who is the threat in the Middle East? Now, there is an agreement signed, a military agreement signed between the United States and Israel. It's been there for many years. Is that in case Israel is ever attacked, that the United States would come to its defense. Fine. The United States has nuclear armed submarines in the Mediterranean, in the Arabian Sea, and the Persian Gulf. They surround the Middle East with their nuclear missiles and this sort of thing. So why does Israel require all these nuclear arms? Why can't Russia and the United States say to Israel, you get rid of all those nuclear missiles, I'll bring a balance, political and military balance to the Middle East, and we will guarantee your security. Why not? So these are things that I wish somebody would talk about, discuss. And the other thing is that in regards to the trade dollar and the devaluation of 10 down to 10%, those are issues that's got to be discussed. I can't do this. I'll go ahead.
Right. Those are very important issues, and the information that you're bringing us, Stan, through your book, Challenges of Change, is paramount. The immediate information with a confirmed prediction on October 13, 2010, that of the decision of the Council of the Regional Council, the Council of Eight, of its UFO sighting over New York, setting out its intent to intervene to clean up the environment of this planet, thus giving us a future, and also alerting us to the dangers that we'll have in this transitory period, and to a hopeful outcome once we get through the transition, where representatives of the Council will be addressing the United Nations, and there'll be a complete transformation of government. I mean, that's extraordinary, and I'm sure that those concerns that you have will be dealt with, in the course of all of these incredible changes that you are describing.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope so. Now, one thing I'd like to mention before we stop here is that I appeared on Coast to Coast AM.
Okay.
The following day, we had over 600 orders for the book, and the next day, I forget how many, we were swamped, and we only had 1,000 books printed that I copied. So next week, we're going for the next print, the fourth edition. And but we're way behind. So when people call in for order a book they can order a book like to our website through our website.
Is that I'm looking at a website here, Challenges of Change. It's on a Google a site.
Yeah, but it's. Oh, God heavens, I forgot this, forward.google.com /
Yeah, it's sites.google.com
sites,
/ and then Challenges of Change.
Challenge Change.
Yeah.
But I want to warn any of your viewers who are interested in ordering a book, just please have patience. You can order now.
Yeah.
But we're just swamped, and we're hiring more people, and hoping to get those books out within the next 2-3 weeks.
Excellent.
So, and thank you, Alfred, for
sure.
the wonderful work you're doing.
Yeah, Stan. And we're going to be monitoring this, Stan, and I hope that you will consent to join us in future programs as developments occur, and we'll be monitoring you and your work and your website closely in the future.
Good. All right. Thank you very much.
And thank you very, very much. And this will be posted as a radio program, but also it'll be an article in the Examiner also.
Good.
Good enough.
Good.
Well, we've been with Stanley A. Fulham, former NORAD officer, author of I can truly say this is an extraordinary book, Challenges of Change. This is Exopolitics Radio. I'm your host, Alfred Weber. Please stay tuned. Thank you.